But if you turn to Mark chapter 16, we're ending this morning the teaching series that we've been working through for the last few months on the theme of beyond. And so I'm just really going to take this morning to sort of summarise the teaching and just add a few extra hopefully points of sort of illustration, application, and illumination. If I can actually find. No, I'm trying to find a sermon on my iPad, so it could be a good one, it could be a short one. I was there this morning when I was. So, Mark 16. I'm going to read some verses that are relatively familiar, but I won't presume that you've read them before. Right at the end of Mark's Gospel, and Jesus is appearing to the 11. And he then says to them, I'm just going to pick up at verse 15. He says this to them: "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. And these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will drive out demons, they will speak in new tongues, they will pick up snakes. If they should drink anything deadly, it will not harm them, and they will lay hands on the sick, and they will get well." So as you know, again, we just need to pull up the slide, if that's all right, Andrew. We've been going through this theme called Beyond, following Jesus together, and the sort of scriptural foundation for this sense of going beyond. We've generally landed in Matthew 28, which is the Great Commission. But I just thought I'd read the end of Mark's Gospel, which is a similar sort of sentiment in terms of Jesus' final words and that command to go. And that's what we've been trying to think about, isn't it? How do we live our lives in such a way with that sense of going? And so I'm going to just unpack that a little bit and reflect on it a little bit this morning as we sort of think about it together. Another verse that we were looking at, or a couple of verses that we were looking at, was Matthew 9 as well, if you want to quickly go to that. Is there any problem with the PowerPoint? Is it not for a reason? Is it not? Oh, I'm looking down there. It's not there. I thought it would be down there. That's okay. So, we looked at this passage, Matthew 9, and we sort of reflected a little bit on this passage a few months back now. You know, this sense of, particularly I wanted to highlight in these verses, that sense that the harvest is abundant. The harvest is abundant, but the workers are few. Pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest. And we've been reflecting on these words of go and send and harvest. And if you remember, when I first spoke back in April to introduce this teaching theme, we thought about these little phrases, you know, to see as Jesus saw, to feel as Jesus felt, and to do as Jesus did. To think about how, as we go into the world, as we live out our lives, how do we begin to think through that sort of sense of implementing those phrases. What does it mean to see as Jesus saw? When you think about your context, you think about your workplace, you think about your neighbourhood, you think about the places maybe where you volunteer or serve in a different way, or just go about your everyday life. How do you see people? How do we see people in a way that Jesus saw people? How do we then begin to feel about these people? That compassion that wells up inside us. And it's all rooted in this passage. And then there's that call to us to do what Jesus did. So what we're looking for as a church, what we're praying for, is this sense of all of us growing, but also introducing others into this journey of discipleship where we're all growing in our love, in our trust, in our faith. We're all growing in our obedience to Jesus. So we have this mission statement to love, trust, and obey Jesus. And so part of this beyond, this sense of going beyond our expectations, sometimes going beyond our comfort zones, stepping out into a place where we might feel slightly uncomfortable. It's because we're seeking to grow. We want to love people. We want to trust God more. We want to obey Him. And we're sort of embodying that as a group of people. So, I don't know whether you have this sense, but one of the things that I would really hope that you'll go away with from this season of teaching is that sense that you are a sent one. That when we get together, when we gather like this on a Sunday or midweek or in our missional communities or in small groups for prayer or Bible study, those times are a little bit like the half-time talk in a football match. That we come together to be encouraged, inspired, equipped, and actually the real action doesn't take place in the dressing room. This isn't where church really happens on a Sunday morning. Sunday morning church is this place where we gather to be equipped, inspired, encouraged, and then sent back out to actually do the stuff, to live the life. You know, for so often the analogy of church is a little bit like a football game or a rugby game, where there's like 22 people on the field doing all the work, and there's like 30,000 people in the stadium who think they could do it better, but they're not actually on the field. That's the sort of testimony of everybody in England manager with Gareth Southgate. But actually the real stuff of Christianity doesn't necessarily take place primarily on a Sunday morning. Sunday morning gatherings are important. That's why we have a rhythm of church which we call and both. Gathered and scattered. But the scattering happens because you are sent. Primarily by God, but also by us as a church family to go into your environment, to your context, to your family, to your friends. Knowing that you are apostolic. We want to be an apostolic church. And the word apostolic literally means sent ones. To go beyond. That's what we've been reflecting on. That's what we've been thinking about. And in our going, there's a couple of dimensions to that, isn't there? There's the sense of growing in confidence to have spiritual conversations. To be able to verbalize something about our faith. I was really encouraged this week in a conversation something was being fed back to me about how a person was going into work on a Monday morning, and in the office coffee break, or where they sort of grab their coffee, somebody had said to them, how was your weekend? And the person felt confident enough to say, well, actually, I went to church on Sunday. And the work colleague was like, oh, I didn't realise you went to church. Why? And I don't know how confident you would feel on a Monday morning when somebody asked you about your weekend. To say, well, part of my weekend, part of the priority of my weekend is that I want to gather with Christians. I know we're a weird bunch, all different, but I gathered with some Christians because by gathering with Christians, it gave me an opportunity to worship God and to be equipped and be encouraged, and all that comes from being part of a church community. The other side of sharing our faith is very much the demonstrative side, isn't it? We demonstrate our faith. And most of us perhaps are more comfortable with this, that we demonstrate our faith by being kind to people. We demonstrate our faith by being people who walk in with a bit more humility. We perhaps demonstrate our faith by volunteering some of our time to serve in an activity that either the church puts on or another organisation, Christian organisation in the city puts on, and we demonstrate our faith. And that's great. We love that here at HBC. So many people are serving across the life of the church by the organised activities that we put on, whether that's a Monday morning at Renew Wellbeing Cafe, or whether it's a Saturday morning once a month at Who Let the Dads Out, or whether it's down at the Crossroads Community Hub, and we're serving tea and coffee to the community cafe, or we're packing food to help us give away nearly 200 parcels a month to people who need food. That's all great. And there's many opportunities for people to get involved if you have the time. But there's other things that people are doing. Some people are expressing their faith, not through the organised stuff of our church, but they're volunteering to lead a cub pack, or they're doing something in another part of their volunteering life. But it's a demonstration of their faith. And some of us, just life is so busy. We've got small children, or we've got larger children, or we've got very busy jobs, and life is really full. And that's okay, because that's where you're living your life as a missionary being sent into your workplace. It's not either or. Does that make sense? We need all of this going on. But all of us have a sense then of being sent by God. And so we've thought about this over these last few weeks, and we've tried to think about how we can encourage and equip ourselves. How do we create and develop a culture as a church? And a culture, for me primarily, is like, how do we do things around here? Like, what's the culture of Hull Baptist Church? And how do we do things? And hopefully the culture is imbibed. It feels certain things. Like, in some senses you can't always sort of write about the culture, but you feel it. And I was with, again, somebody this last week who really encouraged me about how they described that they feel like HBC is a safe place to bring a friend who isn't a Christian yet. They feel like they can bring their non-Christian friend into this space. And it could be a Sunday morning space, it could be a missional community space, it could just be a space where you invite them. But it's a space that's safe enough for you to entrust us with your non-Christian friend. And that's really important, isn't it? I remember over the years of church and events, and And maybe you've had this experience as well, where you invite somebody, a non-Christian friend or family, to a church event, and it's just so cringy and so in your face that actually it slightly puts off your friend, and you lose all confidence in your church to invite another friend to it. Has that been your experience ever? But one of the things we try to do, and we talk about, and we appreciate feedback on these things, is that when we do things, whether that's Sunday morning or an event or a missional communities is one of those spaces that we've created, which is hopefully an easy way in for you to invite somebody to. Because as we keep reminding ourselves, the vast majority of the community of Hoole and Chester haven't woken up this morning at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock and thought, oh, it's Sunday, I tell you what I'm going to do this morning, I'm going to go to church. They're not doing that. Now, some people, because God's God, are having moments where God is breaking into their lives. I was talking to a friend of mine who leads a church further down into the Midlands, and they had a man, a 27-year-old guy walk into church who'd been watching their Sunday morning services or their sermons on YouTube and started to explore and research Christianity. And had done it for 6 months and then decided to turn up on a Sunday morning because he wanted to become a Christian. It does happen. Encourage yourselves. God does still save people. Thanks, Nick, for a nod. Because we need that confidence, don't we? We need that confidence, but it needs to be done in a culture of love and acceptance and welcome and safety, where people can come and explore and have a sense of belonging sometimes before they even start believing. Missional communities are a great space for that. You know, we are discipling people before they become Christians. The people that you relate to, the people that you're talking to, the people that you walk with and work with, you can disciple them before they are Christians. Because the command of Jesus is go and make disciples. That process of discipleship takes place. You disciple them in all sorts of kingdom values. It's not just about a discipleship moment where they make a decision to follow Jesus, but you might be discipling them in kingdom values. I think in the workplace, I know from conversations that I've had with some even in the room, that the way that they seek to lead their teams at work, and they have a responsibility of management and they're leading teams, is that they're instilling kingdom values. And sometimes in our workplaces, there's kingdom values being talked about, but the world doesn't realise that they're kingdom values. They think they're the latest business strategy. Because the kingdom of God works even if you don't know it's the kingdom of God. That's the nature of the kingdom of God. That's the worldview we have as Christians. It's like you don't need to believe this for it to be true. And that's quite hard in our world, isn't it? Because everybody has that little bit of truth. But we have an understanding and a worldview that our truth is set outside of ourselves. Our truth isn't found within ourselves. Our truth is found outside of ourselves as we then apply it into ourselves and live it out. Slightly different approach to the whole self-help model that so many people are engaged with. And we see it in the life of Jesus, that Jesus went about doing his ministry, visiting places, and he initiated spiritual conversations. The woman at the well, this is John 4, is one of the best stories to read and see how Jesus initiates a conversation. Notwithstanding the fact that he's talking to the wrong person at the wrong time in the wrong place, religiously, Jesus should not be talking to anybody in Samaria. He certainly shouldn't be talking to a woman. And he shouldn't be drawing water out of a well at midday. But Jesus knew that God was leading him. And you need to have that sense. That's that sense of being sent and going, because God is with you. And actually, as we move in faith, you'll find that God has already gone before you. God's already at work in your environment, in your world, in our world. God is at work. One of the things that we need to encourage ourselves and equip ourselves is to join in, find out what God is doing. And we do that by starting conversations. We realise that person is a person of peace. Luke 10. They welcome us. You know, when you ask that question, what did you do at the weekend? You say, well, I went to church. There's going to be a couple of reactions, isn't there? Some people will like close the conversation down and think, I don't want anything to do with these church Christians. Well, that's okay. Just pray for them, bless them, and move on. We've got freedom to do that. That's what the Luke 10 people of peace is. But if they lean in and start a conversation with you, you need to have the confidence to then talk about. And the best way to have the confidence is to have a bit of a story, isn't it? Your story is unique to you. Your story of how your faith is real to you is something in the sense that actually nobody can really argue with. It's your story. But you can lift that up, as we've talked before, and we heard a few weeks ago, didn't we? That little phrase in these moments to say to somebody, can I pray for you? Opens up an opportunity to see God move and to come and for the kingdom to be expressed. And we had a great story, didn't we, a few weeks ago from Andy Fuller. Do you remember when Andy got up and shared the story of his neighbour, where he'd said, can I pray for you? And it was one of those miraculous moments where the person was healed of cancer. Gosh, we're all sat there as Brits thinking, really? And sometimes it can be a massive dramatic moment, and other times it's a small incremental step of care and love that you're expressing through the phrase, can I pray for you? So as we sort of land this series, the encouragement to us, and we're going to pick this up over the summer in a few verses from Matthew, if you want to sort of go with me as we land this morning. Matthew 6. Matthew 5, sorry. Matthew 5 verse 14 says, you are the light of the world. So many of us remember and are aware that Jesus in John 8 says, I am the light of the world. Yeah? So Jesus says that about himself, one of those I am statements. I am the light of the world. But here in Matthew, he's speaking to the disciples. He says, you are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. And that's the sort of analogy that we want to reflect on over the summer and think about, and to encourage you. How do you live your life in such a way that it's light to people who are living in darkness? Well, the first thing that you need to understand and agree with is that people are living in darkness. Because we live in such a world at the moment that, particularly in the Western world, where it can feel like people aren't living in darkness. But they are, if we understand the biblical mandate and biblical story. People are in darkness. They need light. And light is such a powerful image, isn't it? Because it doesn't matter how dark a room is, all you need in a dark room to change the darkness is one tiny bit of light. It can just be a match struck or a candle lit, or in our context you could put on the big light or a lamp. You're pointing on the light and the darkness goes. There's no darkness. And that's why light is such a powerful analogy, isn't it? Because as we go into the context and the situations and the environments that we live and work and have our being and leisure, fun, we have the ability to change darkness into light. And some of that is by our presence, some of that is by what we say, some of that's about what we do. And that confidence of them, people seeing your light. Again, I was reading about this over the last few weeks, and there's been a few. Actually, I was talking to Beth London about this, and Beth was telling me, I hope you don't mind me saying that, I've not got permission, but sometimes it's easy to get forgiveness from permission. But we have talked together, so I'm sure she shared a picture, of an image that she had in prayer a while back about lots of little lights being lit, and she'd been praying about it. And then Beth and Abby actually went down to London a couple of Sundays ago to an event called Ascend. And Ascend is a new initiative in the United Kingdom and Ireland to raise up and equip and encourage young adults particularly, but all of us really, to live out our lives as missional living, to be missionaries, to get that passion and that drive and that revelation from God. And they shared a picture from the stage, which is exactly the same picture that Beth had. About they used it, spot fires. Fires being lit in communities all around the nation. And just to encourage you, at this one event in London, there were 7,000 under 30s around about at this event, gathered for 5 hours to pray, worship, be inspired, be encouraged, but also to respond. It was like a call to go and do something. It wasn't like a concert, just in terms of lots of worship and inspirational talks. It was like, well, what are you going to do about it? And then in some senses, that's a little bit of where we are at the end of this beyond season. It's like, well what are you going to do now? What's God saying to you to live your life with that sense of being sent? And if we all live with this sense of light, and we all live with like our light shining, a little bit of acts of kindness, or a spiritual conversation here, or a demonstration of God's love there, and we're all doing that across the city, then we become a city on a hill that everybody sees the light. It's not that there's one big light. I think it's about us all shining our little lights. And actually our little light at Poole Baptist Church then links into the little lights that are shining from All Saints or Vineyard 53 or St. Werburgh's or Wesley Methodist, all these churches across Chester. We're all shining our light, therefore we become a city on a hill. So your small contribution is so important. And it doesn't have to be a massive contribution. It could be, that's okay, but it could just be a small contribution in the way that you live your life and have that sense of being sent as we go from here.